Hello YouTube. I will tell you today about another great Soviet Russian scientist and his theories. And I wish that they were better known in the West throughout our planet. But it's about time that you found out, and of course you can tell others. His name was Kirill Pavlovich Butusov, and he was born in the city of Leningrad in 1929, and he passed away in 2012 in the city now known as St. Petersburg again. He was the Russian astrophysicist, theoretical scientist. He was a candidate of physical and mathematical sciences, a professor and ufologist. He had a tremendous amount of scientific works published in the Soviet Union. He was a member of the USSR Planetology Commission. He was a full member of the Geographical Society of Russia and a member of the Russian Physics Society. Now, what's important to us, he was one of the scientists who did not arrogantly dismiss the so-called orbital horror stories and strange experiences of the cosmonauts. And I told you about some of them in my previous videos, and you can see links in the description to this video, and I urge you to take a look at my collection of information about Soviet cosmonauts and what they had experienced and compare it to what he had. Now, this great Russian scientist, an astronomer, radio astronomer, astrophysicist, and associate professor in the St. Petersburg University of Civil Aviation. He was also a member of the Bureau of the Commission for Anomalous Phenomena at the Russian Geographical Society. They had collected a lot of interesting information, which I use a lot in my research work as well. And I bring out information about them. Now, let's get to Butusov's ideas. For him, the point of view of academician Kaznachev from Russia about the possibility of the existence of plasma form of life, it was not a fantasy but a hint or a guiding light. There are many cases when ball lightning, having flown into a dwelling, does not just crash into the very first obstacle but purposely chases people, hitting everyone in turn. What are these if not signs of intelligence, albeit sinister behavior? Here's something he brought up. Near the South Pole, Russian polar explorers, and after them the Americans, saw a plasma cloud in the form of a sausage meandering in the sky and killed those who tried to shoot it down. I've not heard about it in other instances. Maybe others have. I've not. Now, Butusov defended the good name of cosmonaut Vladislav Volkov, who died during the landing of the Soviet descent spacecraft, and who heard dogs barking in orbit, and he knew it was a Laika, the canine Soviet pioneer of space, which was left to die in the space. Now, over 4 decades, and more than 400 people from different countries have traveled into space. They have encountered many things out there, including mysticism, but usually the space explorers prefer to keep quiet about that which has no explanation. Soviet cosmonauts, as I told you in other videos too, were advised not to be frank about the strange phenomena and just not talk about it. But some people say in Russia that even Yuri Gagarin once made a statement that if he was allowed to, he could tell a lot of interesting things about his space flight. And yet, something from this forbidden knowledge was discovered and collected by Professor Kirill Butusov, who gathered bit by bit testimonies of Soviet, Russian, and Ukrainian cosmonauts. Once a strange story happened to me in orbit, used to say cosmonaut Georgy Grechko. When he was flying over the dreadful Cape Horn, where in ancient times there were many shipwrecks, Suddenly, he had a sense of danger. It seemed that a tiger was about to jump on his back. Right then, it was a very eerie feeling. The cosmonaut was just barely able to get rid of it. Now let's speak about Vladislav Volkov again. He spoke very poetically about mysterious sounds in space. He died on his return from orbit in 1971 with Dobrovolsky and Patsayev. He used to say, terrestrial night was passing below, and suddenly from this night came barking of a dog. He thought it was the voice of their Laika, the one that perished in orbit. But then the crying of the child became distinctly audible, and some voices. It is impossible to explain all of this, he used to say, but to feel it, yes. According to the memoirs of a famous Soviet musician, Vyacheslav Mishcherina, cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin, listening to the group's concert, said that when he was in orbit, very similar music sounded in his ears. Later, this impression was confirmed by cosmonaut Alexei Leonov. After a third of a century passed, another cosmonaut, Sergei Krychevsky, at a scientific conference told about the oddities that occurred in Earth orbit with him and his colleagues. For example, through the windows of the orbital station they saw gigantic figures of angels. Many astronauts felt someone's presence in the dark abyss and felt someone's gaze directed at them. And one of the space explorers clearly heard the voice of his dead mother. Son, go away from here. You appeared here too early. Now, if you look at my other videos about Soviet cosmonauts and their experiences, you will be able to hear other testimonies, another angle as to what had happened. Now, let's get back. Now, of course, the space explorers, clinging to the remnants of common sense, they tried to convince themselves that what they heard was nothing more than hallucinations caused by the stress of separation from terrestrial conditions. But what then is to be done? Asked Butусов, with a warning about a malfunction received by one of the inhabitants of the Mir station. It was made by an anonymous voice from black space. After checking the equipment, it turned out that the prompt was not only timely and accurate, but also life-saving. So the message they got from outer space helped save lives of Soviet cosmonauts. Now, modern physics shuns some effects just because it is unable to give them a reasonable interpretation. For example, the effect of visual increase of objects observed from near Earth orbit. If, say, the whole of Brazil is visible from the spaceship's porthole, how do we treat the statement of Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Glaskov, who saw blue bus running on a Brazilian highway? But Glaskov is not the only one whose view seems to contradict the laws of optics. Cosmonaut Vitaly Sevastyanov also managed to distinguish from space a small two-story house near the Sochi harbor port, where he spent his childhood years. And for the first time, the effect of atmospheric lens was discovered by American astronaut Gordon Cooper. He was not declared crazy, but they, meaning the Americans, did not comment on the strangeness of all of this. Now, Kirill Butусов was convinced that all such oddities are objective reality. If we consider them to be mysticism, we will not move forward in our understanding of the universe. Wouldn't it be better to admit that science just has not come to explain the paradoxes of outer space as yet? The Soviet scientist Butусov, was loyal to the idea of flying saucers supposedly manned by intelligent beings. It is impossible not to believe the thousands of eyewitnesses who claim that UFO clusters are observed in war zones, over nuclear test sites, and near nuclear power plants. If the outer space is inhabited, the interest of our brothers, so to say, in intelligence to our advanced technologies is understandable. They want to know what we're doing. Now, this is the first time today that I'll mention the other Earth. There is another planet in Earth orbit that is slightly smaller than Earth's mass. Butусов used to say. Pythagoras' student wrote about it. Now, Soviet scientist Butусов, not yet knowing the work of the ancient Greek scientist Pythagoras, came to the same conclusion based on the deviations of Venus and Mars in their movement in orbits. It turned out that the Earth's Doppelganger is hiding behind the sun, and therefore we cannot see it. Although in the rare hours when Gloria, that's what he called the second Earth, peeps a little from behind the protuberances of the luminaries, it can be observed. It can be seen and observed. That was done in the mid-18th century by the director of the Paris Observatory, Gian Domenico Cassini, and the English astronomer James Short. The physical and chemical conditions on Gloria are identical to Earth. The orbit is the same. So there too could and should have developed life. Perhaps it is on level that is higher than our Earth. And then it is clear that the Glorians not only visit the Earth, but are also concerned about the buildup of nuclear potential of our planet. If the explosions change the parameters of the Earth's movement, it is possible to collide with the neighbor in orbit. Kirill Butусов began to reflect on the mysteries of the universe from the first days of his work at the Pulkovo Observatory, where he got in 1954. Through the so-called distribution of graduates, this was a Soviet policy, after graduating from the Polytechnic Institute. I won't go into all of his early discoveries, but he did find a few things before the Americans did, but he was not supported by his bureaucratic supervisors. So the first bitter experiences taught the young employee a lot. He realized that the winner is the one who fights to the end for his ideas and does not pay attention to the skepticism of colleagues. Once, for example, Butусов began to look and find out the reason for the discrepancy of one of his theories with experimental data. After all, for example, he took into the account the influence on the sun of all the planets known at the time. So he thought maybe there is another mysterious body behind Pluto's orbit. The astronomer made calculations and gave precise instructions on where to look for a new planet. He called it Equiuran. In the 1990s, this is where planetoid Sedna was discovered. The difference with the prediction was only 1%. So that's an example I gave you. There's a great Russian saying that says, the appetite comes at meal times. Butусов, with renewed energy, began to look for new patterns in the solar system. And over the years, he has discovered more than 24 amazing facts. Among them are the symmetry of the perihelion planets, the symmetry of orbits relative to Jupiter, the likeness of the solar system to the Saturn's satellite system. This is all very interesting. Eventually, the Russian astronomer developed the so-called wave cosmogony of the solar system, which explains the mysteries of the planet's birth, the features of their orbits, and predicts many absolutely incredible things. In 1987, he defended his PhD thesis. One of the most curious conclusions from Butусov's theory is the hypothesis about the existence of anti-Earth. And this is the second time today I will talk about the other, or anti-Earth, if you call it like that. The revealed patterns suggest that another unknown planet should be in orbit of our planet. For example, in the Saturn system orbiting the Earth, two satellites rotate at once, Epimetheus and Janus. Epimetheus is an inner satellite of Saturn. It is also known as Saturn VI. It is also known as Saturn 11. It is named after the mythological Epimetheus, brother of Prometheus. Every 4 years they get closer, Janus and Epiphemus. But at the moment when a seemingly imminent collision occurs, a miracle happens. Epiphemus slows down and goes into Janus's orbit, and Janus accelerates and takes the place of his vis-a-vis. But if the Earth has a twin brother or sister, why don't we see it in any telescope? Butусов was convinced that an unknown planet, which he called Gloria, hides us from the disk of the Sun. In the Earth orbit, just behind the Sun, there is a point called libration. The Russian astronomer explained, it is the only place Gloria can be, because the planet rotates at the same speed as our Earth. It is almost always hides behind the Sun, and it is impossible to see it even from the Moon. To fix it, you need to fly 15 times further. This could have been done by the American pioneer of Voyager satellites, but apparently no one had given them such a task or mission. But there is one interesting point. The libration point is considered to be very unstable. Even a small impact can move the planet aside. Maybe that's why Gloria becomes visible sometimes. Thus, in 1666 and 1672, the director of the Paris Observatory, Cassini, observed a sickle-shaped body near Venus and assumed that it was its satellite. But now we know that Venus has no satellites. In the following years, many other astronomers, Short, Montel, Lagrange, they saw something similar. And then the mysterious object disappeared somewhere. The existence of Gloria is indirectly evidenced by more ancient sources. For example, a wall drawing in the tomb of Pharaoh Ramesses VI. On it, the golden figure of a man apparently symbolizes the sun. On both sides of it are the same planets. Their dotted orbit passes to the third chakra, but the third planet from the Sun is the Earth. If Gloria exists, it is most likely to have life, or perhaps even a developed civilization. After all, the planet is in the same conditions as our Earth. Many UFO sightings, especially during nuclear tests, could find an explanation as such. After all, any cataclysms on our planet pose a serious danger for Gloria. If nuclear explosions moved our Earth, the two planets will sooner or later converge, and a terrible catastrophe will happen. And how to explain the disappearance of comets behind the disk of the Sun, or huge difficulties in building the theory of the movement of Venus and Mars. Now, let's move away from Gloria. Perhaps even more important for humanity, Butусov's theory is that the Sun is a binary star, the same as many other stars in our galaxy. The second star in the Butусов solar system was named Raja-san, as the first mentions of this second sun were found in Tibetan legends. The lamas called it a metal planet, thus emphasizing its enormous mass at a relatively small size. It appears in our region once every 36,000 years, and each of her visits ends with huge shocks or disasters for our Earth. It was 36,000 years ago that the Neanderthal disappeared on our planet and the Cro-Magnon man disappeared. Presumably, at the same time, the Earth acquired a satellite, which we know as the Moon, intercepted from Mars, according to Butусов. Before that, according to legends, there was no moon in the sky. Butусов suggested that Raja's sun was ahead of our luminary in its development. Following the natural processes of star evolution, it passed the red giant phase and exploded into a brown dwarf. Having lost a lot in mass, Raja's sun passed the planets around it to the present sun. Moving in a very elongated orbit, it goes far into space at a distance of more than 1100 astronomical units and becomes almost indistinguishable for modern observers. But the most unpleasant thing is that the next return of the killer star is expected soon. So we go from year 2000 minus 100 years. It's kind of soon. Most likely, the Raja sun will pass through the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Perhaps these cosmic fragments are all that is left of one of the planets after contact with the evil dwarf, which is 30 times larger than Jupiter in mass. In any case, the upcoming meeting does not bode well for Earthlings. Some other interesting information about Butусов, which I want you to know. Kirill Butусов put forward a hypothesis of one of the possible triggers mechanisms of strong earthquakes, taking into account the impact on the Earth of shock waves of the solar wind excited by chromospheric flares on the Sun. According to the hypothesis, the shock wave moving from the Sun on the Archimedes spiral falls to the Earth not in a sunflower point and west of it at 50-60, but west of it at 50-60 degrees latitude. At the same time, our Earth plays the role of a lens, focusing the wave at a diametrically opposite point below the Earth's surface, corresponding to the local time of 3.54 hours of the night, coinciding with the period of sleep, and therefore the most dangerous for the population. Statistics show that the probability of devastating earthquakes in this period of time is very high. In addition, Butусов offered methods of short-term, 20 minutes, and long-term, 26 hours, forecasts of earthquakes occurring under this mechanism. This is something that should be studied by scientists in other countries as well. So, as I mentioned, little is known about Butусов in the West. I know that there is at least one Russian scientist who described one of Butусov theories some years ago in Europe. A little known phenomenological structural formula of the solar system was proposed by Butусов, and it is demonstrated that this structural law may also exist in an extrasolar system. In 1973, Kirill Butусов, an astronomer from the former Soviet Union, proposed a new structural law. This law is almost unknown outside of Russia, as all publications dedicated to it are in Russian. Nevertheless, this law is very interesting. According to this law, and they call it the Butusov law, the product of semi-major axes of planet that are symmetrical related to Jupiter, for example, Ceres and Saturn, Mars and Uranus, is equal to the square of the semi-major axis of Jupiter. Butusov's law simply says that there is a Jovian symmetry of planetary distances in the solar system. Butusov's law is purely phenomenological, that is, it has no recognized theoretical basis. Nevertheless, it is correct for all celestial bodies that are recognized as planets and dwarf planets by the International Astronomical Union. Butusov tried in his later works to provide such a basis, but his results were not accepted by the scholarly community, as they were based on non-traditional approaches towards the solar system. Butusov's law may seem to be just a number game to the scientists, but if it is confirmed not only for the solar system but also for other planetary systems, it will clearly show that we are far from an understanding of the mechanisms that are responsible for the formation of these systems, that an investigation in order to find a dynamical basis of this phenomenological law is necessary. The hypothesis that the most massive planet is responsible for the precise structure of the planetary system. I think it would be great if Kirill Butusov's theories were better known in the West, in China, and of course I am proud of scientists in the that were very proficient in pushing their theories and hypotheses in the country where I was born, and they only add to the glory of the Russian science. And I hope that this research in their ideas become international, and who knows, maybe we will see those visitors from planet Gloria in the near future. That's what I wanted to let you know. I will bring you more information in other videos. I do ask you to please support my research. You can see the information on how to do it in the description of this video. And I thank you for your attention, and I will meet you again soon. Thank you.